could you imagine a scenario where a meme had sufficient functional adaptive significance so that the individuals who acted it out gained a reproductive edge?
Yes.
Okay. So then you could imagine a situation where there was, I think I've got this right, a Baldwin effect between the meme and the genome.
Yes.
Okay. So then could you imagine an effect where the heroic hunters of the past who decided to cease acting like prey animals, maybe when they got rocks or sticks, were acting under the impulse that facing down the predator was the appropriate strategy? Because I was thinking about this reproductively. Like, you know that women are hypergamous. They like men cross-culturally about 4 years older than they are. The most fundamental female pornographic fantasy involves vampires, werewolves, pirates, surgeons, and billionaires. Dominant men who are capable of standing up to predators, who can be brought into an individual relationship. Okay, so that's the fundamental reproductive story meme that seems to drive women. It's allied with the hero myth. They're the different variants of the same story, the different sexual variants of the same story. And it seems to me it's not unreasonable to note that that's the fundamental story of humanity. And so I don't understand why you're not impressed by that.
We started talking about the Baldwin effect, and suddenly we got into women, what women like. I mean,
well, the men who act out the heroic meme are much more likely to reproduce.
It's an example, but perhaps we need to explain what the Baldwin effect is.
I was going to say, that's probably helpful.
Yes, that would be useful.
Okay. It was suggested by Baldwin, I think in the late 19th century. It's a kind of genetic assimilation of a cultural or a learned idea. So the idea is that certain animals learn things, learn a clever trick. It might be nut cracking by chimpanzees, for example, or potato washing by Japanese macaques, or opening milk bottles by English tits. And it perhaps spread as mimetically as an epidemic of copying, and that's known to have happened with the blue tits and great tits in Britain. Now, certain individuals are likely to learn it faster than others, and there may be genetic variation in the speed with which they learn it. And as the generations go by, natural selection would have favored speed of learning the new trick. And eventually they would have learned the new trick so fast, they didn't need to learn it at all.
Right.
It becomes genetically assimilated into the genome. That's the Baldwin effect.
Okay, I would say that's essentially the same pattern of archetype evolution that's implicit in the Jungian theoretical
Well, that's
model.
very interesting, because that suggests that Jungian archetypes might be genetically assimilated via the Baldwin effect.
Yes,
now, that's a fascinating idea.
Yes. Okay, so now...
I know we're coming to the end of our time soon anyway. It's nice to end on a shared point of interest, which is the Baldwin effect and the archetype's potential origin in the Baldwin effect. Do you think that is something that is worth exploring further? Is that something that we can
crucial
that we can
I
test?
think it's interesting. Yes.
Well, it speaks of the potential relationship between the spread of memes and the alteration of the genetic process. I would say it probably happens fastest by sexual selection. So right. So imagine that a meme. Okay. So imagine a meme develops a representation, imaginal, and the people who embodied are more effective in dealing with predators. And then imagine that there's a concordance between that and the attractiveness of those males to women. Seems highly probable. Well, then you can see that because sexual selection is a pretty rapid mechanism, that Baldwin effect gets spinning forward very rapidly.
I've even suggested, actually, a slightly way out suggestion, that the human habit of standing on our hind legs might have been sexually selected and then genetically assimilated via the Baldwin effect. Chimpanzees do sometimes walk on their hind legs. Now, if for mimetic reasons that was sexually attractive in our ancestors, so that it spread as an epidemic of sexual display, then natural selection could have favored those individuals who were best at standing on their hind legs, genetically speaking, and then it would become genetically assimilated, this sexually selected mimetic effect could have been genetically assimilated and given rise to the genetic tendency to walk on our hind legs.
So I remember what I was going to ask you about this. So imagine you have a situation in the biblical narratives where the idea of sacrifice is dramatized and ritualized. So it's acted out. It's not exactly understood. It's dramatized and acted out. Well, I believe there's a concordance between the probability that that sacrifice would be offered and the ability of someone to forego gratification or to work towards a future end. They're the same thing. And the ability to forego gratification, which is associated with cortical development, is a great predictor of future success. Let's say future, because we know, for example, that trait conscientiousness, which is something like the ability to delay gratification, is the best predictor that isn't cognitive of long-term future success. The ability to sacrifice the present for the future is a hallmark of a strategy of adaptation that's going to propagate down the generations.
That's interesting. As a Canadian, you probably know about the potlatch phenomenon.
Yes.
Where a great sacrifice is a social display, destruction of one's own property which is a form of sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Destruction of one's own property is a mark of prestige.
Right. Well, it indicates, I know those communities, it indicates two things. Your willingness to distribute generously to the community, because you're a big man if you can do that, but also your faith in the process by which that wealth was generated. I'm so good at, I think women use wealth as a marker of sexual attractiveness, not because they're interested in wealth, but because wealth is the best single predictor of the ability to generate wealth. And the potlatch is that kind of manifestation. It's like, yes, I have all this stuff. I can give it away and burn it, and I can make it again. Because it isn't the wealth, it's the capacity to generate the wealth, right? It's a process or a spirit, you could say, if you wanted to get metaphorical about it. So there's this remarkable concordance between your work and these works that I've been investigating. Like I said, no one knows the two literatures. And so it's very frustrating in a sense, because I understood your concept of meme, I would say, in exactly the way that you just laid it out. And I thought, this is exactly what I've been studying. There's these fundamental narratives, and the people who embody them. Look, the heroes in the theater, they're actors of a narrative meme. They're obviously attractive. People flock to watch them. You know that if you take vervets and you show them pictures of the other vervets in their troops, they spontaneously gaze longer at the higher status vervets. Right, it's exact. So imagine this, in the human society is that you have people who act out the appropriate meme, let's say, which is something like a meta strategy for dealing with predation. It's something like that. You can approximate that to a greater or lesser degree. The more you approximate that, the higher you are on the sexual selection, in the sexual selection hierarchy. And I think that's clear. Like, it's a bit more complicated than that, because women seem to be, the pornographic literature that women prefer is both the capacity to stand up against predation and maybe even to be a predator, but that has to be brought into alliance with the ability to make a intimate relationship and share. So it's like half monster, half cooperative distributor, cooperative generous distributor. It's something like that. You can see that's a real knife's edge evolutionarily, because you want someone who can keep the real monsters at bay. But if they're such a monster that they don't share and aren't generous and can't take care of their children, they're just another bloody predator.
So, Richard, the Baldwin effect applied not so much just to the mimetic preference for people who stand up, for example, but something like a dragon, the abstracted predator. Is there any kind of Baldwin effect implication of this kind of meme?
I think there could be. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea that Jungian archetypes could be Baldwinized memes.
And perhaps the dragon could be one of those.
Well, you didn't have that terminology,
No, of
even
course.
the Baldwin effect terminology, but that notion is implicit in his writings. Like he was struggling. He also didn't precisely understand sexual selection, let's say. So the idea lurks implicitly in his work. There's never a statement like that, but you can see clear indications of his struggling towards something like a Baldwin effect explanation.